Well, here we are on this very, very important day in the life of St. Michael's, as I've said earlier. And I thought it would be good for us to consider some thoughts on leadership and power in the context of what we're about to do later on in today. There are many funny stories, of course, of leaders and their responses to situations. I remember reading about President Calvin Coolidge, a man of very few words, who was attending a government function in the 1920s when a young lady approached the president and said enthusiastically, "Mr. President, I have made a wager with a friend of mine that I could persuade you to say more than 2 words to me. Could you?" And President Coolidge, without expression, said, "You lose." And in a speech delivered at Galesburg by then President Bill Clinton, he said that running a country is like running a cemetery. You've got a lot of people under you and nobody's listening. There is no doubt that Alexander the Great was a terrific and great leader. In his famous speech to his soldiers at Opus, Alexander reminded them that the royal house had raised them from poverty to wealth and from obscurity to greatness. And before each of the battles, Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, Alexander appeared before the assembled ranks of his soldiers, clad in his magnificent armour and fighting gear, and appealed to their pride, played down their fears, and spoke to them of his vision of victory and the spoils that it would bring them. He always led by example. Always hugely outnumbered by his enemies, he won by taking risks, not only for his army but also for himself. Boldness was his creed, demonstrated by his practice of choosing the point where the enemy appeared the strongest, not the weakest, but the strongest rather than the weakest, and making that focus of an all-out cavalry charge which he led himself. At the Battle of Gaugamela, in the decisive battle against the great Persian king Darius, Alexander waited until a gap opened in the Persian lines and then led his troops with a loud battle cry straight at King Darius. The Persian king turned and fled, and Alexander pursued him to Darius's death. If we were to sum up Alexander's leadership qualities, we could say this: he had a positive attitude, that he took time and effort to care for his troops, and that he did not allow his mind to be sidetracked by seemingly obstacles, and that Alexander always led from the front, not giving orders from behind the troops. Leadership is, of course, a public transaction, and the concept of leadership affirms the capacity of individuals to move, inspire, and motivate other groups of people so that they can act together in the pursuit of an end or a goal. Individuals as leaders can certainly make a difference. Consider this. In 1931, a British politician was crossing Park Avenue in New York City between 76th and 77th Streets around 10:30 p.m. As he crossed the street, he looked in the wrong direction and was knocked down by a car. And a moment later he recalled, "I do not understand why it was not broken like an eggshell." 14 months later, an American politician sitting in an open car in Miami, Florida, was shot at by an assassin, and the man sitting beside him was badly wounded. Those who believe that individuals make no difference to history might well ponder whether the next 2 decades in the 20th century would have been the same had Mario Cassini's car had not killed Winston Churchill in 1931 and Giuseppe Zangara's bullet had killed Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. Sometimes leadership serves good purposes and sometimes bad. But in the end, great leaders are men and women who leave their mark in a positive way on an organisation, a community of people, or a nation. Today, I wish to focus about one aspect of leadership, and that is the way that power can be used in leadership. Over the years, a number of leadership studies have been done on the great person theory, the charismatic person who sweeps all before them. And other studies have focused on the personality traits of the leader, or studying the behaviour styles of various leaders. And perhaps a more fruitful approach is to look at the followers rather than the leaders, and to ask the question, why followers follow? And there are three types of power that most leaders practice. And the first kind of power is what we call coercive power. And in this situation, people follow out of fear. They're afraid of what might happen to them if they don't do what they're asked to do. The leader in this case has created a fear in people that either something bad is going to happen to them or something good will be taken away from them if they do not comply. And leaders tend to lean on coercive and intimidating power when they are afraid they won't get compliance. However, the use of power in this situation gives the picture of effectiveness, but it is illusionary. People who follow in this situation will have a superficial commitment to the organisation or community. And often their energies are turned towards sabotaging the organisation or community or group when no one is looking. In the past, every British Navy ship that had steam turbines had covers over the turbines with padlocks on them. And that was a form of security to stop disgruntled sailors from throwing a handful of metal shavings into the turbines that would have immobilised the ship. A second use of power suggests that followers follow because of the benefits that come to them if they do. This may be called utility power because the power is in the relationship and it's based on useful exchange of goods and services. The followers have something the leader wants: time, money, energy, interest, talent, and support. And the leader has something they want: information, money, promotions, inclusions, camaraderie, security, opportunity. These followers operate in the belief that the leader can and will do something for them if they maintain their part of the bargain by doing something for the leader. And most organisations, of course, are held together by utility power. The power is based on a sense of equity and fairness. And for as long as people feel that they are receiving fairly for what they are giving, the relationship will be sustained. A third use of power is based on the power some people have with others because others tend to believe in them and what they are trying to accomplish. They are trusted and respected, and they are followed because others want to follow them, want to believe in them and in their cause. This is not blind faith, mindless obedience, or robotic servitude. This is knowledgeable, wholehearted, legitimate power. And unfortunately, legitimate power is rare. It is the mark of quality, distinction, and excellence in relationships. It is based on honour, with the leader honouring the followers and followers choosing to contribute because the leader is also honoured. In modern times, I can think of no better example of this kind of leadership power than Dr. Martin Luther King. Last January, this year, 2019, Martin Luther King would have been 90 years of age. He left behind a legacy of service, sacrifice, commitment and faith, and of course is remembered as one of the most foremost examples of courageous moral leadership around the world. He showed us that you must have total commitment to a cause. He was a man who had a dream bigger than the times in which he lived. He was arrested over 25 times and spent many, many months in prison, and was assaulted at least 4 reported times. He also demonstrated that disrupting the status quo in society is essential for change. While King is honoured today, he wasn't embraced by the society of his day. He knew that his dream of equality was more important than maintaining the status quo. Sometimes doing things differently is what's necessary for evolution and innovation to take place. The final thing to say about King's leadership is if we have a dream, then communicate it and do it. You may remember the pictures as he stood before 250,000 people. He began his speech with these words: "I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the life of our nation." How effective is a vision or a dream if we're not communicating it? As you begin the congregational process today of deciding on a new minister, a new leader in your midst, I'm sure that they will want to hear about the dreams that you have, each one of you, that you have for St. Michael's. In King's last public speech delivered in Memphis on April the 3rd, 1968, he gave an inspiring call to peaceful action. In the prophetic "I've been to the mountaintop" speech, this is what he said: "Like any man, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know right tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." The next day, as you know, he was shot and killed as he stood on the balcony of his hotel. In the allegory of the waiting servants in Luke's Gospel, which Marie read to us this morning, it appears to represent the early church, and the allegory warns Christians to be on the watch for Christ's return. It is a metaphorical summons to preparedness, to be ready. Let your loins be girded and your lamps burning. I can think of no better phrase as you wait for your new minister. Let your loins be girded and your lamps burning. Our blessing. And may the winters of life which have just passed us be filled with the warm light of your divine Spirit and the promise of